Welcome to a brand new video, Purple Political Talk here. Today is Monday, December 27th, 2021. And today we're going to be taking a look at the 2022 United States Senate elections and doing an update on my prediction. But before we do begin, I want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, and to turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. And also that channel memberships are now open. If you would like to become a Purple Political Talk channel member, you could do so by pressing the link down in the description or the join tab next to the subscribe button. And in that spirit, I did want to give a very big thank you to our Purple Political Talk channel member, Adam Hurst. We really could not do this without you. Now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, let's get started with the video. So, these Senate elections in 2022 are really going to be very crucial. And I think that in many ways, it holds an importance that, we see time to time. But if there's just a couple of specific midterm years where the Senate is really valuable, and I think this is one of them, considering the fact that currently, Congress is split 50-50 in the Senate, it is important for both parties to win control, whether it be by solidifying it or if alternatively, if it is, at least putting themselves in a better position. And I think at this point, we have to really think about the real political importance of this. The reality of it is that it's very important for them because without the Senate, for the Democrats, it becomes very difficult to pass legislation. Right now, the Democrats, I would say their biggest problem is legislative. They can't do anything legislatively. The Senate's 50-50 with Joe Manchin, essentially working against them in many ways. So you see, that's something that's going to be difficult for them, and it's proven to be difficult for them, and that's a big problem. So winning the Senate is going to be something that could help the Democrats put themselves in a better position come to 2024. And as for the Republicans, the Senate could bring immense amounts of different things to them. They have more powers to do things with Biden. They can mess around with the Biden presidency and do kind of like the things when the opposition has, Congress, they make the life of the incumbent in the White House a lot more difficult. With this said, I think it's important to note that, these races can definitely change. And there's a lot of things that are still to happen, right? But for the Republicans, this could also set them up for a very strong 2024 year if things are done correctly. So, I think that it's important to talk about what the stakes are for the Democrats. The possibility of Biden fixing his agenda, the possibility of Biden, bringing everything together in a better way, if you will. Now, I think that with these races, there are going to be some races that maybe in the past we haven't seen that close. But, I think that these Senate elections are going to be, somewhat competitive. Now, one of the things that we're going to be seeing is a very interesting phenomenon where we're seeing a lot of the races, shift, I think. But we're going to go talk through that as we go through the prediction. On your screen right now, you're going to be seeing the safe states. So safe states are states that would go by over 15%. And I really think that these are states that regardless of anything that happens, we will be seeing, the respective parties winning in those states. For the Democrats, the West Coast, the East Coast, and for the Republicans, big parts of, the Midwest, kind of going the West Midwest, if you would call it that, and the South. So, as we can see right now, the Democrats do have a one-seat advantage to the Republicans, with the Republicans at 44 seats and the Democrats at 45. Now, this is not as important. What really is important is what happens in these toss-up states. So, let's start off with the likely margin. So, again, likely states are states that would go by a margin of around 5 to 15%, right? And let's start off with the Democrats. So right now, I think there's a couple of races we could say are likely Democratic. I think within those, we have the states like New Hampshire. These are states like Colorado where, the Democrats have certainly built, a very big amount of support in these states. In New Hampshire, we're probably going to see a very close race. However, last minute we saw, Chris Sununu, the Republicans' last hope to win this seat, saying that he was actually going to be running for governor. And ultimately, that really changed the panoramic, panorama in this race, where we can now see Maggie Hassan kind of comfortably go on to probably win this race by a margin around 7 to 10%. In Colorado, I think it's going to be, pretty good for Michael Bennet. Now, I think that the big thing that we're going to be seeing in the state of Colorado is, of course, the margins are going to be a little less. I think that coming into 2022, it is easy to say that it's likely going to be a red wave year. So I think it's something that's coming in. And with that said, I do think it's important to note that even in states where the Republicans, haven't performed as well as recently, in states where you could say, the Democrats have, performed very well. And we can see examples like Virginia. We can see examples like New Jersey. Even with these states being so Democratic, there's still a possibility of margins tightening down. And I think something that's going to be happening across the board during the 2022 United States Senate elections. So that covers the two Democratic likely states. Let's move on to the Republicans. So the Republicans certainly do have some likely states. I think within those states, you could say states like Ohio, states like Iowa, and states like Florida. So I think that generally speaking, these are states where you could say, the Democrats have really lost ground, especially in Florida, where, it's been really shocking. But in Iowa and Ohio, we've seen that, really been something that, has been taking place over time. In Ohio and Iowa, these races are a little different. So Iowa is pretty interesting as Abby Finkenauer, she's a very, popular person within her old congressional district in Iowa. She represented a part of rural Iowa, and she's a Democrat. And I think she could have probably interesting, going against Chuck Grassley. Now that Chuck Grassley's that old, now Chuck Grassley's going to hold on. He's been in the Senate for years now. And ultimately, I don't think the Democrats have what it takes to win a race, especially in Iowa, during this midterm year. Now, going on to Ohio, it's more interesting because it's an open seat. And ultimately, what really comes down to is in the state of Ohio, you're going to have kind of the battle between kind of the two opposite sides. And anyways, right now, the Republicans are way more popular in Ohio than Democrats, and the Democrats have really lost a lot of that support that was necessary for them to win in those races. And as for Florida, it's very important to note that, populations in Florida have really shifted. We've seen a lot more conservative Florida. Take a look at South Florida. Hispanic populations in the state of Florida are voting a lot more for the Republicans. And within the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis is very popular, and that's really going to help Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is a candidate that really has, he's built himself in Florida politics. And, his opposition when it comes to the Democrats, the people they're running, they're not people that I think could beat him. So at this point, with that said, and with Florida, trending red, and looking at past Senate results, I think it's likely to say that Marco Rubio will win the state of Florida by a likely margin. So that covers all our likely states, and that puts our total back to a very tied race, 47 for the Republicans and 47 for the Democrats. So we have 6 seats outstanding, which will fall between the lean and tilt column. So let's move on to the lean column, which are seats that would fall between 1%, 1.5%, and 5%. So let's start off with the Democrats. So there are certainly some seats that I think the Democrats have the possibility of winning by a lean column. I think within those seats, one of the states that I've been very wishy-washy on has been the state of Nevada. I do think that, the Republicans, as time goes on, we're going to be able to see them, getting closer to the victory in Nevada. I think that's something that's a possibility. However, as of right now, I would say Nevada would go by a lean margin, whether it be so slightly, maybe 1.5%, 2%, to Catherine Cortez Masto. And I do think at this point it's something that, the Democrats could count on. And if things get worse in the Democratic Party in Nevada, if the Republican campaign seems to be, gaining a lot of, traction, I think that it's certainly a very big possibility that this state goes by a tilt margin perhaps, or actually flips to the Republican Party. Now, I think that's the only lean state for the Democrats. A lot of the races I think that the Democrats could win are going to be by a lot closer margins. Again, when you're looking at a wave year, it's a lot more difficult for, the incumbent party in Congress. Now, as for the Republicans, there are certainly some states I think they're going to be winning. I think North Carolina is probably going to be around 3 and 5, between 3 and 5%. I think that they have the big possibility of exceeding expectations here. The Democrats, they do not have enough traction in the state to probably win this race, especially in a wave year. Now, if we were talking a 2018 environment, this map would look completely different. Now, I think that since we're not talking a 2018 environment, that's a map where we're going to see a lot more Republican support, a lot more, enthusiasm within the Republican Party. And if you take a look at, just generic polls, because we still do not have a lot of the specific polls for a lot of these races, generically, Republicans are overperforming expectations when it comes to the next midterms with the congressional polls. We're seeing them on average doing 3 points, 2 points above Democrats. And by a rule of thumb, I like to add 3 or 4 points to the Republican when it comes to polling as the margin of error. And of course, the margin of error could certainly always go back and help out the Democrats, but I think that generally speaking, the margin of error usually applies to Republicans, overperforming because of different biases, maybe in collection and such. So I think that with this said, I think that places like North Carolina, it's going to be out of reach for the Republicans or for the Democrats, even though it's going to be a closer state for that race. With this said, I do think that, if we're looking at states like Wisconsin, I think Ron Johnson's also going to be able to win. Again, it's going to be very difficult for a lot of these places for the Democrats to make the inroads, especially with what Biden has, accomplished in the last year of his presidency. We're nearing on 1 year of Biden's presidency, and I think that his performance on the job, and it's not, it's really going to be something that a lot of voters are going to be taking a look at. And when you look at his approval rating in all parts of the country, it's very low. Take a look at pandemic numbers. Take a look at all of these different things. He is the president of the United States. And ultimately, when you have a national crisis like COVID, and we have a small scale, probably small to medium scale, we're not full recession mode, but we have an economic problem with inflation and, a lot of lack of workers. All those things are going to heavily impact Biden in many different ways. I think the Midwest is going to impact the Democrats, negatively. So that covers all our lean states. That puts our total to 49 Republicans to 48 Democrats. Remember, Democrats only need 50 seats to win control of the U.S. Senate because Kamala Harris breaks the tie as the 51st vote. But let's move on to the tilt states. Tilt states are going to be the states that are going to be deciding the 2022 election. I think, those very close states. And I think these are going to be states that are going to be very interesting to watch, and a lot of this can really change. Remember, take these predictions with a grain of salt. We're still 1 year away, and a lot of things could happen in these races. Candidates can get into scandals, a lot of different things. So let's start off with the Democratic states. So I do think that Raphael Warnock has the slight possibility of holding on in Georgia. I think that if anyone's going to hold on in Georgia, I think it's going to be Raphael Warnock. And honestly, right now, with what's currently going on in Georgia, I think that, I think the Republicans could win control of the governorship mansion. They could retain control of that. However, I do think that Raphael Warnock could actually end up, retaining his seat, but ever so slightly. Again, this is bound to change. Maybe, in a couple months, we come back and say, well, the perspective has really changed. I think it's a very big possibility that the Republicans could win in this race. Remember, these are very close races. As for Arizona, I think that we're looking at a race where Mark Kelly is pretty vulnerable, and I think that while Mark Kelly could be popular, I think that it's going to be something that it's going to be pretty difficult, in my opinion, for him to hold on, especially with the current environment. Now, there's a lot of things that, are factors here, and I think that Mark Kelly, he's a pretty he's popular in the state of Arizona, right? If not, he wouldn't be senator right now. But I do think that there's a possibility of him not performing as well. And that those are things that we're going to see as time progresses. And in Pennsylvania, I think the state is really tossed up. I think in one part it's because both parties, I think the candidates they have are not as exciting. But I do think the Republicans can narrowly end up winning this. I think that, looking at the big Republican candidate right now, which is Dr. Oz. He's running for Senate in Pennsylvania. And you look at, maybe Connor Lamb or John Fetterman, whoever ends up being, the nominee for the Democrats. It's something that I'm looking at it and saying, I think with the current environment of the country, with what voters in Pennsylvania really like and what they really need, I think the Republicans are the ones that are going to end up winning in those races. So as of right now, I put the Senate at 51 Republicans to 49 Democrats. Again, very close Senate year. I do think that this map would have benefited the Democrats if Trump hadn't won the election. But not that Trump did not win the election. I think it's putting the Republicans in a very favorable spot. So that covers my prediction. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.